Have you ever looked inward, really, really paused to consider that deepest sense of self, the you, that experiences everything?
Hmm.
And then maybe wondered how that you could possibly connect to, well, the immense, sprawling universe around us?
It's such a fundamental question, isn't it? One that really probes the very nature of existence itself.
It really does. It's baffled thinkers for, gosh, millennia. Ancient sages right up to cutting-edge neuroscientists today.
And you find so many traditions across cultures, across centuries, grappling with this exact thing, often arriving at insights that, well, despite their very different origins, they surprisingly resonate with each other. They seem to point towards a singular kind of truth about identity.
Absolutely. And that right there, that resonance, that's really the heart of our deep dive today. We're taking a journey into the mystical core of Hindu philosophy, specifically focusing on the Upanishads.
These aren't just, old historical documents. They are profound philosophical treatises, really foundational texts.
Foundational, exactly. And they make this central, bold, and frankly, utterly transformative claim. Tat Tvam Asi.
Which translates to, that art thou.
That art thou. It posits that your individual soul, your Atman, isn't just connected to, but is actually one and the same with the universal consciousness, Brahman.
It's a concept that just demands a complete reorientation, a total shift in how we understand ourselves and really our place in the cosmos.
Yeah.
So our mission, if you like, in this deep dive is to unpack this idea of non-duality. We want to examine how it fundamentally challenges our sort of ingrained perception of a separate self.
That feeling of isolation we often have.
Exactly, and the very nature of reality itself. We'll explore this through some key dialogues, some really powerful parables, and maybe some surprising insights drawn from a whole range of sources.
And we'll even touch upon how other traditions, ancient and modern, either echo this or maybe contrast with this really profound idea.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these threads appear elsewhere.
So get ready, because this really could stretch your mind a bit. This isn't just a beautiful turn of phrase or like a spiritual metaphor.
No, not all.
This is a profound philosophical statement with deep, truly life-altering implications for how we perceive ourselves, our relationships, the world around us. Okay, let's dive in. Let's unpack this truly radical claim. Right, let's start with the absolute cornerstone of this philosophy. The declaration Atman is Brahman. To really get the magnitude of this, we need to understand what these two incredibly potent terms actually mean. First up, Brahman, what exactly are we talking about here?
Okay, Brahman. It's conceived as the ultimate universal consciousness. You can think of it as the absolute reality that underlies all existence.
The ground of being.
Precisely. The ground of being from which everything arises and ultimately to which everything returns. It's crucial to understand it's not a deity among other deities, nor is it some created thing. It is, quite simply, is sunniness itself, the fundamental nature of reality.
Wow, Isramness.
And what's really fascinating here, and maybe connects this to a bigger picture, is that this isn't exclusively an Eastern idea. You find these striking parallels in, say, Western mysticism too, which suggests maybe a universal human intuition about this singular ultimate reality.
Oh, interesting. Like where?
Well, take Theologia Germanica, for instance. It's a really significant work of Christian mysticism. It describes God as being neither this nor that which the creature as creature can perceive, name, conceive, or express.
Okay, so beyond description.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It goes on to state that God is all good and above all good, comprehending every kind of good, and that all good things are of one substance in the one good.
So a singular source.
Yes. This text points to an ineffable singular source of all being, much like how the Upanishads describe Brahman. It's a reality so fundamental that it just transcends all our categories, all our definitions.
It's a powerful way to frame it, transcending all categories. So it's not a thing we can grasp with our senses or even maybe fully with our intellect, but it's the very essence of everything. And then we have Atman. How does Atman fit into this picture?
So Atman, kind of in contrast to the vast, expansive Brahman, refers to the individual soul, your true self.
Okay.
It's that core essence within each being, which is often seen as maybe obscured or hidden by our day-to-day worldly experiences, our personalities, our physical bodies, the roles we play.
Stuff we usually identify with.
Exactly. Atman is the unchanging you behind that ever-changing facade of your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations. It's often likened to a spark of the divine, a deeper identity that persists beyond all the temporary stuff.
And the teaching that binds these two together, the one that makes this philosophy so, well, revolutionary is that declaration, Tat Tvam Asi. That art thou.
Just 3 words.
Incredible, right? Just 3 words, but they carry this enormous weight, a kind of philosophical blast radius, if you like. What does it truly mean experientially for Atman and Brahman to be identical? Is it just a metaphor, or is it something much more direct?
Oh, it's far more than a metaphor. It's really presented as a profound call to direct realization, a fundamental truth that's meant to be experienced, not just, intellectually agreed with.
Okay.
It means that the deepest, most fundamental aspect of your individual self, that Atman we just talked about, is not merely connected to or a part of, but is in fact the ultimate universal consciousness, Brahman.
Wow.
There is simply no fundamental separation. The Upanishad texts themselves elaborate on this. They state, the one who knows this becomes the self of all beings. What that deity is, he is.
Becomes the self of all beings.
Yeah, it directly illustrates this idea of transcending the limited, separate individual self to realize a universal identity, an unbounded consciousness. And the implication, it's a state of profound liberation from suffering. As the text suggests, whatever sorrow creatures have remains at home with them. Only good goes to him. No evil goes to the gods.
So you become kind of impervious to the suffering tied to the individual ego.
That's the idea, because you've realized your true, boundless nature.
So this isn't about just believing it or getting your head around the concept. It's about experiencing it as a fundamental truth of your being. That's a huge paradigm shift, isn't it?
Absolutely massive.
It means the search for ultimate truth isn't some external quest, not out there in temples or elaborate rituals or even in the ancient texts themselves, ironically.
Right.
But profoundly in here. It's an inward journey.
Precisely. This understanding radically shifts the whole locus of the search. Instead of seeking some external deity or getting caught up in complex outer rituals, the emphasis moves entirely to an inward realization of what is already eternally present within you.
What's already there.
Yeah. And interestingly, the Bhagavad Gita, which is a later but hugely influential Hindi text, it acknowledges the authority of these Vedic literatures like the Upanishads. It even states that ignoring them is an unnecessary disturbance in society.
Wow, strong words.
Very. Now, the Gita does go on to present a different ultimate realization, one focused on Kaloni as the supreme personality of Godhead. But even so, it underscores the foundational importance of these non-dualistic Vedic insights, perhaps as a stepping stone.
Okay, so it builds upon it in a way.
You could see it like that. It's about recognizing the truth within yourself first, experiencing that inherent unity, maybe before even contemplating external, personal manifestations of the divine. You have to first find the ground of your own being. It's like the essential preliminary step for any deeper spiritual understanding.
That's fascinating. It simultaneously grounds the divine experience firmly within the individual, yet expands that individual to encompass, well, everything. It's both incredibly personal and utterly universal at the same time.
Okay, so if Atman is Brahman, is this profound underlying truth, then it really begs the question, why don't we all experience it all the time? Why do so many of us feel so incredibly separate and distinct, from the universe, from each other?
This leads us straight into the concept of the illusion of separation. And from what our sources are telling us, the ego seems to be, well, the primary architect of that separation.
That's absolutely the core challenge, isn't it? The ego, as we commonly understand it, is indeed seen as the primary mechanism through which we perceive ourselves as these distinct individual entities, fundamentally separate from this universal consciousness.
Right.
It's the part of us that creates our personal narrative, that sense of me with its unique history, its preferences, its boundaries. I mean, without it, we wouldn't really function in the relative world,
But it also creates this profound illusion of being an isolated unit.
Exactly. And it's not just an innocent construct, is it?
Oh.
As you said, our sources really highlight that the ego is actually a very defensive mechanism.
Okay.
It seems to actively oppose anything that might threaten its perceived separateness. It's almost like it's fighting for its own survival.
Yeah, fighting for its life.
Right. Well, of course, the Miracles points this out quite beautifully, explaining that the ego, therefore, opposes all appreciation, all recognition, all sane perception, and all knowledge. Why? Because it perceives these things as a total threat.
A total threat.
Yes, because in its view, all commitments the mind makes are total. So, in essence, the ego fears anything that might dissolve its carefully constructed boundaries, because that dissolution feels like annihilation to it.
Like death.
Exactly. The text further states, by making another kingdom that you valued, you did not keep only the kingdom of God in your mind, and thus placed part of your mind outside it. that vividly illustrates how the ego constructs this alternate reality, this separate kingdom of individual concerns and desires that distances us from the universal, unified truth of Brahman. It literally pulls our attention away from unity by creating a really compelling but ultimately illusory alternative.
So this clinging to a solid, separate self, as Pema Chodron puts it, isn't just some benign habit. It's seen as the root cause of so much of our suffering in many of these traditions. She emphasizes this by saying we need to get totally fed up with these patterns of thought. What does that kind of fed up actually look like?
Well, she says, believing in a solid, separate self, continuing to seek pleasure and avoid pain, thinking that someone out there is to blame for our pain. One has to get totally fed up with these ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Getting fed up here isn't just, intellectual dissatisfaction.
No.
It's an emotional and existential turning point. It's when the sheer exhaustion of constantly trying to maintain this separate self, of endlessly chasing fleeting pleasures and blaming external circumstances for our inner turmoil, when that finally becomes unbearable.
You just can't do it anymore.
Right. It's that moment of profound disillusionment where you realize these ingrained patterns simply aren't working, and you become truly ready to question them, maybe even dismantle them. It really sets the stage for a fundamental challenge to these deeply embedded patterns of egoic identification.
Okay, so beyond the ego specifically, the mind itself plays this enormous role in constructing this perceived reality of separation. It's not just the ego structure, but how our minds filter, interpret, process everything.
Yes. The mind, particularly when it's, let's say, unidentified with the deeper self or pure awareness, can become a powerful factory for creating the sense of separation in a distorted reality. Eckhart Tolle clarifies this really well. He says, you are cut off from being as long as your mind takes up all your attention.
All your attention.
Yeah. When this happens, he says, our entire sense of self, our identity, becomes derived from mind activity. Our sense of who we are is then based purely on thoughts, beliefs, memories. And this identity, because it's no longer rooted in the deeper being of Atman, it transforms into this vulnerable and ever-needy mental construct.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is, and it generates fear as its predominant underlying emotion. Think about it. A mental construct needs constant reinforcement, constant external validation. It's inherently insecure.
Yeah.
This just shows the profound impact of mind identification on our experience of self and emotion.
It really does.
Tolle also offers this fascinating insight that every being is a focal point of consciousness, and every such focal point creates its own world, although all those worlds are interconnected. There is a human world, an ant world, a dolphin world, and so on, and yet all worlds are ultimately one.
That's beautiful. It captures that simultaneous separateness and unity.
Exactly. Individual, mind-constructed perspectives existing within an overarching, interconnected unity.
But that's a huge point. Our default state for so many of us is to be our mind, to be the constant stream of thoughts, judgments, stories. So how do we even begin to distinguish ourselves from that incessant mental chatter? How do we find the you that is not the thought?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Michael Singer, in The Untethered Soul, introduces this really powerful concept of the watcher consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It provides a crucial distinction here.
The watcher.
Yes. He notes, very simply, if you're hearing it talk, it's obviously not you. You are the one who hears the voice. You are the one who notices that it's talking.
Ah, okay. Simple but profound.
It really is. It creates this fundamental separation between the incessant mental chatter, the inner voice, the ego's narrative, and the pure awareness that observes it. If you can hear a thought, you are not the thought. You are the space in which that thought arises.
The space.
Yes. He goes on to say, awareness transcends what it is aware of. It is as separate as light is from what it shines upon. This highlights that you are the conscious space in which thoughts and feelings arise, not the thoughts and feelings themselves. It's a simple, yet potentially profoundly liberating realization.
That is a powerful and very practical way to reframe it. And what's truly mind-bending is that modern neuroscience, coming from a completely different angle, seems to be echoing this ancient wisdom. They're suggesting that our very sense of a unified, solid self might actually be an illusion. What are they finding?
Indeed, it's fascinating. Sam Harris, approaching this from a neuroscientific perspective in Waking Up, states that the sense that we are unified subjects is a fiction, produced by a multitude of separate processes and structures of which we are not aware and over which we exert no conscious control.
Wow. A fiction.
That's his word. It offers this modern scientific reinforcement for the idea that our common sense of self, that solid singular me at the helm, is not what it appears to be. Our experience of a cohesive self is more like a constructed narrative, an emergent property of various brain functions. And this aligns surprisingly well with the Upanishadic notion of a deeper, non-dual self underlying the superficial ego.
So it's not that you don't exist, maybe, but that the you commonly identify with is far more complex and less unified than it feels?
That's a good way of looking at it.
So if our internal sense of self, our subjective experience of me, is fundamentally a construct, what about the external world we perceive? Is the material world also, in some sense, an illusion? Or Maya, as it's often called in Hindu philosophy?
Yeah, that's the next logical step in this line of thought. From this non-dual perspective, the material world, with all its seeming solidity and permanence, is often seen as a temporary manifestation, or indeed, an illusion Maya.
Okay, but does that mean the trees and buildings aren't real?
Not quite like that. It's more that their nature of existence is not ultimately real in the same way that Brahman is real. A Course in Miracles reinforces this, stating, "Truth is without illusions and therefore within the kingdom. Everything outside the kingdom is illusion."
Everything outside the kingdom is illusion.
And further, reality is changeless. Miracles but show what you have interposed between reality and your awareness is unreal and does not interfere at all. This emphasizes the transient, fleeting nature of our perceived obstacles and the ultimate unreality of anything that isn't truth itself. It's really an invitation to look past the ephemeral forms to the changeless essence.
That's a profound thought. So it's not that the world doesn't exist at all, but its nature of existence is radically different from how our senses and minds typically perceive it. It's not ultimately real in the same way Brahman, the ultimate reality, is.
Precisely. And Robert Pirsig in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance uses this really striking, almost poetic metaphor to convey how heavily conditioned our perception is.
Oh yeah, the ghosts.
The ghost. He says, the world has no existence whatsoever outside the human imagination. It's all a ghost. And in antiquity was so recognized as a ghost, the whole blessed world we live in, it's run by ghosts. And then the kicker, your common sense is nothing more than the voices of thousands and thousands of these ghosts from the past.
Wow, that really hits home.
Doesn't it? It powerfully conveys the idea that our perception of the world isn't some direct, unmediated apprehension of reality, but rather a deeply conditioned, inherited, culturally infused construction. Our common sense is largely a collective hallucination, you could say, a consensus-driven reality shaped by generations of thought and belief, and not necessarily reflective of ultimate truth.
So the illusion of separation isn't just internal about our sense of self, but it extends to the very fabric of the reality we think we inhabit.
Exactly. We are, in a very real sense, living within a story we collectively tell ourselves.
Okay, so we've established this really radical claim of Atman as Brahman, and we've explored how our ego and mind meticulously construct this powerful illusion of separation. Now, for someone who hears that art thou and feels that deep resonance, the natural next question has to be, okay, how do I actually live this? How do I begin to dissolve these illusions and directly experience that unity? What are the practical paths, the journeys of self-transcendence that these traditions offer?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? The journey to realize Atman as Brahman fundamentally involves a process of letting go of the false self, the egoic identity, and then directly experiencing reality as it is. This isn't just an intellectual exercise or a philosophical debate. It's presented as a deep experiential transformation that requires a profound inner shift.
It's about disidentifying from everything you're not.
Exactly. So you can discover what you truly are.
In this letting go, it leads to a state that Pema Chodron calls egolessness. Now, that word might sound a bit scary to some, like you lose your personality or become a blank slate or something.
Right, it can sound negative.
But she describes it in incredibly positive terms, really far from what you might initially imagine.
She does. She defines egolessness as a state of mind that has complete confidence in the sacredness of the world. It is unconditional well-being, unconditional joy that includes all the different qualities of our experience.
Unconditional joy. That sounds pretty good.
Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a diminished state. It's actually an expansive one. It's letting go of the ego's protective armor, its constant need to control, which then opens you up to this profound sense of joy, acceptance, and an open, trusting relationship with the entirety of existence.
So when you're not constantly defending a separate self.
You can fully engage with life.
Yeah.
With its pain and its beauty without that resistance. It's
Wow.
about being fully present and engaged without the filter of that vulnerable, separate self getting in the way.
Now, what's fascinating here is that while many spiritual paths involve gradual steps, practices, disciplines, there's also this idea of a sudden realization of non-duality, like a switch flips. Sam Harris touches on this in Waking Up, highlighting a perspective that can seem quite counterintuitive if you're used to the idea of spiritual striving.
Yes, he notes that the path of sudden realization can appear impossibly steep, and it's often described as non-dualistic, precisely because it refuses to validate the point of view from which one would meditate or practice any other spiritual discipline.
Wait, refuses to validate the practice. How did that work?
Well, think about it. If the ultimate truth is that you already are Brahman, that consciousness is already free of a separate self, then what is the you that would do the practice to achieve it?
Okay. I see the paradox.
Right. The core of this perspective is that consciousness is already free of anything that remotely resembles a self, and there is nothing that you can do as an illusory ego to realize this. This non-dualistic perspective, Harris points out, is found strongly in Advaita Vedanta, which comes directly from the Upanishads and also in a few schools of Buddhism.
So it implies the truth isn't something to achieve or gain through effort.
But something to recognize, something that is already present, a fundamental reality simply obscured by our identification with the ego.
That's a massive challenge to our usual way of thinking about progress and goals, especially spiritual ones, the idea that there's an I who needs to do something to get somewhere. But for many people, there are still specific practices, forms of inner work, designed to help purify the self and move towards this union, right? Even if it's framed as clearing away obstructions rather than gaining something new.
Absolutely. And if we look across different traditions, we find really strong parallels in these inner journeys towards union, particularly, for instance, in Christian mysticism.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Well, St. John of the Cross, in his famous work, Dark Night of the Soul, describes this profound and often quite arduous process of purgation or stripping of the soul of its imperfections.
Purgation. Stripping away. Sounds intense.
It is often described that way. It's seen as a preparation of it for fruit of union. But what does that purgation actually look like? It's often experienced as this slow, sometimes agonizing process of shedding layers. He calls this dark night an inflowing of God into the soul, which purges it from its ignorances and imperfections, habitual, natural, and spiritual.
An inflowing of God that purges.
Yes, and which contemplatives call infused contemplation or mystical theology. Imagine your most cherished beliefs, your core self-identity, even your deepest desires being fundamentally challenged, not by some external force, but by a divine wisdom entering and transforming you from within. It's like a spiritual detox, maybe, where everything that isn't truly you is burned away.
That sounds incredibly difficult, but also transformative.
He even describes the soul entering a vast and profound solitude to which no created thing has access, in an immense and boundless desert. This intense, solitary inner journey, stripping away all that is not the true self, it remarkably mirrors the shedding of the ego required for the realization of the universal Atman. It's a journey into the unconditioned essence.
And St. Teresa of Avila, she's another major figure in Christian mysticism, right? She speaks of a similar experience of merging with the divine.
She does. In her interior castle, she speaks of the union of love, where the soul spirit is verily made one with the celestial water. These are such powerful, evocative images of merging, of becoming utterly one with the divine, again echoing that Upanishadic concept of Atman Brahman identity.
So even though the theological frameworks are different,
the experiential convergence on a state of profound unity is just striking. Both traditions speak to a dissolution of boundaries, an absorption into something infinitely larger than the individual self.
it really is remarkable how these distinct traditions arrive at such similar descriptions of unity. And then you have Buddhism, for example, with the concept of anatta, or no self. Now, on the surface, that sounds quite different from Atman, the true self, but it also points to a dissolution of the fixed individual ego. Can you help us unpack that distinction and maybe the convergence there?
Yeah, that's a really crucial point of comparison and often a source of confusion. The Dhammapada, a key Buddhist text, states, "When through wisdom one perceives all dhammas are without self, then one is detached as to misery. This is the path of purity."
All dhammas are without self.
Right. Now, while the concept of Atman generally refers to an eternal, unchanging true self, and anatta refers to the absence of such a permanent individual self, both traditions fundamentally converge on the idea that the illusion of a separate, fixed individual ego is the source of suffering.
Okay, so the problem is the illusion of the fixed ego in both cases.
Exactly. In Buddhism, the identification with a fixed self, called akka, leads to clinging and attachment, which are seen as the roots of suffering. By realizing, Anada, that there is no fixed permanent self, one lets go of that clinging and finds liberation, or nibbana. So while one tradition asserts an eternal self and the other denies a permanent individual self, they both fundamentally dismantle the conventional, illusory, suffering-prone ego as the pathway to liberation.
So they point to the same space of freedom, maybe, even if they describe the ultimate nature of what's found in that freedom in different terms?
That's a really good way to put it, yes.
So whether it's recognizing no self or finding the true self within, it seems it all comes back to some form of inner work, a cultivation of presence, and a deep ongoing awareness of our internal landscape.
Indeed. And Eckhart Tolle provides very practical guidance here. He advises us to deal with the past on the level of the present.
Okay, what does that mean practically?
It means give attention to your behavior, to your reactions, moods, thoughts, emotions, fears, and desires as they occur in the present. There's the past in you. What he's saying is that all past hurts, traumas, conditioning, they manifest now in your current thoughts and feelings. You can't truly resolve the past by endlessly analyzing it. You resolve it by bringing mindful awareness to its present manifestations.
Ah, okay. Deal with it where it shows up now.
Precisely. And Michael Singer echoes this strongly. You cannot find yourself by going into the past. You find yourself by coming into the present. The key, he says, is to be the ever-alert guardian of your inner space.
The ever-alert guardian.
Meaning a continuous, non-judgmental awareness of your thoughts and emotions, preventing your consciousness from being completely absorbed by them. This creates the necessary space to disidentify from the mind and begin to experience that deeper self, that watcher.
And this cultivation of presence, this sort of dissolving of self-other boundaries, it extends really beautifully to practices of compassion too, doesn't it? Like Tara Brach's Tonglen practice, which seems designed to dissolve those perceived boundaries between self and other.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tara Brach's adaptation of Tonglen, which is rooted in Tibetan Buddhism, is a beautiful and incredibly powerful example of this. It involves, quite radically, breathing in the suffering of others, their pain, fear, confusion, and then breathing out care, compassion, relief.
Breathing in suffering, that sounds difficult.
It can be challenging, but the practice leads to, as she puts it, opening to the universal experience of this suffering and letting go into spaciousness with prayer. As your heart opens to the enormity of suffering, you become that openness. Tonglen is a very practical method for expanding consciousness beyond the individual self, dissolving those perceived boundaries through radical empathy and compassion.
It's like an active way to embody that non-dual truth of interconnectedness.
Exactly. You realize that the suffering of others isn't fundamentally separate from your own potential for suffering. And by embracing it, by meeting it with compassion, you expand your own sense of self into this boundless, compassionate awareness. It's a direct experience of that art thou, in action, really seeing yourself reflected in all beings.
So once these illusions start to dissolve, maybe through these practices or through moments of insight, and one moves down these profound paths, what does that direct experience of unity actually feel like? How does it transform a person, their outlook, their very being? It sounds like it's often beyond words, almost ineffable.
It is indeed often described that way, profoundly ineffable, a direct experience that just transcends ordinary language and our usual conceptual understanding. William James, in his classics, The Varieties of Religious Experience, he captures this with some really vivid accounts from individuals.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, one person describes an ineffable joy and exultation, where all the separate notes have melted into one swelling harmony that leaves the listener conscious of nothing, save that his soul is being wafted upwards.
Wow. Not just happiness, but like cosmic harmony.
Exactly. A deep, overwhelming sense of bliss stemming from that dissolution of individual boundaries. And this same individual even reported feeling less real than the divine presence they encountered.
Less real. That's startling.
Isn't it? They concluded, I stood face to face with God and was born anew of his spirit. That less real feeling points to a complete reordering of one's sense of self, where the familiar egoic identity just recedes in the face of this overwhelmingly real, universal consciousness.
Feeling less real than the divine presence. That's a stunning statement. It truly implies a complete restructuring of identity. And James even mentions visual phenomena sometimes accompanying these states, right? Lights and things.
Yes, he does. James also mentions luminous phenomena, photisms, and even floods of light and glory that can sometimes accompany these profound shifts in awareness. These might be transient, but they are often deeply impactful, marking a direct transformative encounter with the divine. It reinforces that feeling of the Atman being one with Brahman.
So these aren't just psychological events in the mind.
They are often felt as a profound apprehension of objective reality, a glimpse into the true nature of existence. They serve as powerful confirmations, often irrevocably changing a person's life and their understanding of who they are.
So, this realization of Atman as Brahman, it isn't just about an individual's personal enlightenment tucked away somewhere. It profoundly transforms one's relationship with others, with the entire world. It's an expanding self, moving beyond mere individuality, where the other is no longer truly separate.
Absolutely. The implications ripple outwards. A Course in Miracles illustrates this beautifully when it talks about relationships. Your brother's holiness is sacrament and benediction unto you. He is the mirror of yourself, wherein you see the judgment you have laid on both of you. The Christ in you beholds his holiness.
That's beautiful. Seeing the divine in others helps you see it in yourself.
Precisely. It highlights how seeing the divine or the inherent worth in others isn't just some moral imperative, it's a direct pathway to recognizing it in oneself. By seeing holiness in your brother, you dismantle your own judgments and the illusion of separation that fuels them. It's a direct, practical application of that art thou. If Atman is Brahman, then the Brahman in your brother is the same Brahman that's in you. Every single encounter becomes an opportunity for recognizing that unified reality.
That's a powerful way to think about eliminating judgment and fostering real connection. And Theologia Germanica, which you mentioned earlier, offers a very similar insight, but framed in terms of diminishing the self to allow the divine to increase.
Yes, it's another direct, powerful echo of the Atman-Brahman identity, just framed within Christian mysticism. Theologia Germanica states quite bluntly, the more the self, the I, the me, the mine, that is self-seeking and selfishness, abate in a man, the more doth God's I, that is God himself, increase in him.
So the ego acts like a barrier.
Exactly. This profound teaching suggests that our individual ego, with all its attachments and desires, it acts as a barrier or an obscuration. As that barrier diminishes, the universal divine, what it calls God's I, naturally expands within. It further notes something really interesting. All men, nay, the whole world lieth in disobedience. Now, were a man simply and wholly obedient as Christ was, all disobedience were to him a sharp and bitter pain. But though all men were against him, they could neither shake nor trouble him. For while in this obedience a man were one with God, and God himself were one with the man. This describes a state of unshakable peace and interconnectedness, a profound resilience that comes from realizing your unity with the ultimate reality. The external world, with all its turmoil, simply loses its power to disturb you, because your core identity is rooted in something utterly unassailable.
Wow. And speaking of profound connection, love is so often described as a path to unity, isn't it? A way of dissolving those boundaries between self and other. Eric Fromm, in The Art of Loving, he makes a distinction between just falling in love and a more enduring state.
Yes. Fromm makes a crucial distinction there between the initial experience of falling in love, which is often intense but maybe fleeting, and the permanent state of being in love, or, as we might better say, of standing in love.
Standing in love, I like that.
Me too. He notes that even a moment of oneness is one of the most exhilarating, most exciting experiences in life. And while this is often transient and perhaps tied to another person, this experience can provide a foretaste of, and therefore an incentive for, the more lasting mystical ecstasy that can be ours after a lifetime of love, as Scott Peck describes it in The Road Less Traveled.
So love gives us a glimpse.
It highlights love as a powerful, albeit often temporary, experience of dissolving those ego boundaries and touching upon the deeper unity. In those moments of genuine connection, you glimpse the that art thou in another, and in doing so, you experience it within yourself, however briefly.
It sounds like these profound experiences of unity aren't just for, isolated spiritual seekers or distant mystics living in caves. They can actually transform our everyday lives, helping us find meaning and peace right here, right now, no matter the external circumstances, even in really dire situations.
Absolutely. And Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, speaks so powerfully to this, even from the unimaginable depths of a concentration camp. He recounts how the goal of my lecture was to find the full meaning of our life. At that very moment and in that very place, in our hut and in a situation that offered virtually no hope. And he concludes that experienced being is the most real form of life.
Experienced being.
This emphasizes the power of presence, of direct experience, in finding profound meaning, regardless of the external circumstances. When one lives from the awareness that art thou, every moment becomes infused with that ultimate reality. The meaning isn't out there somewhere waiting to be found, but it's in here, the awareness and the presence you bring to each moment. Even in extreme suffering, that inner space of being of Atman can be touched, offering a profound sense of self, of meaning that transcends the situation.
Wow. This deep dive into Atman is Brahman has really revealed such a powerful, almost staggering claim about fundamental unity. But, it's also important to acknowledge that there are different interpretations, even within Hindu traditions, about the precise nature of this ultimate reality. For example, while Upanishadic thought often emphasizes an impersonal Brahman, other traditions or interpretations bring in a more personal aspect to the divine.
That's a really crucial nuance, yes. And it highlights the rich diversity within these spiritual paths. While, as you say, Upanishadic thought often emphasizes the impersonal, all-pervading, attributeless nature of Brahman, a reality beyond all names and forms. Other significant Hindu traditions, like the one found in the Bhagavad Gita, offer a broader understanding, one that encompasses both the impersonal and the personal.
Okay, how does the Gita frame that?
Well, the Bhagavad Gita teaches that the absolute truth is realized in three features: impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, the supersoul within, and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Three features.
Yes. It suggests a kind of progression in spiritual realization. It says that in the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning towards impersonalism. That makes sense, right? Moving away from forms.
Yeah, you see that.
But it continues, when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in the spiritual life and that these activities constitute devotional service. So this perspective views the impersonal Brahman as a profound, but perhaps incomplete, step towards understanding a more personal divine, like Kuna, who is described as the complete energetic person.
A person, not just a force.
Right. It describes Kuna as having transcendental senses, which are uninfected, able to see all, know all, travel throughout space with spiritual legs and spiritual hands. It offers this vibrant personal dimension to the ultimate reality that contrasts quite starkly with the purely impersonal conception of the divine.
So it's not necessarily a flat contradiction between these viewpoints, but perhaps different levels or stages of realization, with some finding a deeper, more personal connection to the divine as they advance.
Exactly. You can see it as a continuum of realization, recognizing that the ultimate reality can manifest and be experienced in both impersonal and personal forms, depending on the individual's spiritual disposition, their path, their stage of development. Both can be valid expressions of the ultimate truth, just experienced through different lenses.
Okay. But with any profound spiritual concept like non-duality, there's always this crucial danger, isn't there? The danger of merely intellectualizing it, just treating it as a neat philosophical idea.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge pitfall. It's one thing to understand Atman is Brahman intellectually, to grasp the philosophical concept, maybe even argue about it, but it's quite another thing to truly realize it and live from that realization.
Aldous Huxley, who is such a brilliant synthesizer of these Eastern and Western ideas, he gives a really powerful warning about this, doesn't he?
He does, and it's a vital caution we should probably heed. In the Perennial Philosophy, Huxley states that nirvana and samsara are one, is a fact about the nature of the universe. Now, nirvana is liberation, samsara is the cycle of suffering and existence. The realization that they're ultimately non-dual, the same reality viewed differently, is profound. But, Huxley continues, it is a fact which cannot be fully realized or directly experienced, except by souls far advanced in spirituality. And here's the warning. For ordinary, nice, unregenerate people to accept this truth by hearsay and to act upon it in practice is merely to court disaster.
Court disaster.
Wow. Yes. He warns against what he calls antinomianism. That's where a superficial, merely intellectual understanding of all is God and God is all leads to serious moral or spiritual pitfalls. If someone believes all is God without any true realization, they might start rationalizing any action, thinking, oh, it's all part of the divine dance. This can undermine ethical responsibility and the very purpose of spiritual practice, which is often about purification and transformation. It just underscores that critical difference between conceptual knowledge and direct, lived, transformative experience. You can't just adopt the endpoint belief without walking the path.
That makes perfect sense. It brings us back in a way to the fundamental philosophical underpinnings of how we even conceive of reality in the first place and how our minds actively construct it, which directly impacts our perception of separation. Plotinus, the ancient Neoplatonist philosopher, he offers a really rich view on the soul's nature and its place in a kind of grand hierarchy.
Yes, Plotinus is fascinating here. In his Enneads, he describes the soul as having a twofold intelligible and sensible nature. Basically, A part connected to the world of pure thought and universal forms, the intelligible, and a part connected to the changing material world of the senses, the sensible.
Intelligible and sensible.
And he states quite clearly that it is better for the soul to be in the intelligible, meaning the soul thrives, finds its true nature when it's connected to that higher realm, rather than being totally engrossed in the fleeting material world. He posits this hierarchy of principles, beginning with the One, which is the ultimate source, very much akin to Brahman.
The one, like Brahman.
Exactly. Followed by the intellect and then soul, which emanate from the One. This provides a really profound Western philosophical parallel to the idea of ultimate unity. He says that in the intelligible world, all is transparent, and each individual too, suggesting a realm where individuality exists not as separation, but as a transparent, interconnected expression of the One. The soul's true home, its greatest fulfillment, lies in this direct apprehension of unity, moving beyond the fragmented sensible world into a deeper, unified reality.
And Pirsig, whom we talked about earlier with his Ghosts of the Past shaping our common sense, he also delves really deeply into how our minds literally construct our reality, drawing on those foundational debates between philosophers like Hume and Kant. This can get quite dense, so maybe could you walk us through that with his motorcycle example?
Absolutely. It's a crucial insight into just how deeply ingrained this illusion of separation is, even right down at the cognitive level. Pirsig revisits this in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by discussing David Hume's empiricist view. Hume argued that everything I know about this motorcycle comes to me through my senses.
Okay, makes sense so far.
So if you see a motorcycle from the front, then you walk around and see it from the side, then from the back. All you actually have are distinct sets of sensory impressions, colors, shapes, lines. Hume argued there's no logical basis for substance, meaning there's no actual sensory input that logically proves that what produced these different views is the same continuous motorcycle object. It's a really radical skepticism about objective reality based purely on sense data.
So logically, they could be different things creating those impressions.
According to Hume's strict empiricism, yes. You just assume the continuity. Then, Pirsig presents Immanuel Kant's rescue of common sense. Kant argued that our minds aren't just passive receivers of data, they actively organize sensory data.
The mind structures it.
Precisely. Kant posited that we have in our minds an a priori motorcycle, a kind of pre-existing mental template, which has continuity in time and space and is capable of changing appearance as one moves one's head and is therefore not contradicted by the sense data one is receiving.
So our mind imposes the idea of motorcycle onto the data.
In simpler terms, yes. Our mind inherently imposes the concept of a single, continuous object onto the stream of disconnected sensory experiences. We don't just see colors and shapes. Our mind instantly constructs motorcycle with permanence and coherence. This whole philosophical discussion just underscores how our minds actively process and construct what we perceive as a coherent reality. It makes the illusion of separation not just some high-level spiritual concept, but a deeply ingrained cognitive and perceptual process. Our very perception of things as separate, enduring entities is an act of the mind, a fundamental way we make sense of what would otherwise be a chaotic flood of sensory input. Without this innate mental structuring, our world would just be fragmented chaos.
Wow. We've really covered some vast territory today. Moving from the deepest declarations of ancient wisdom, like the Upanishads, all the way to the complexities of modern philosophy and even touching on neuroscience. We started with that core Upanishadic declaration, Atman is Brahman, that really radical claim that art thou, your individual soul, your deepest essence, is one in the same with universal consciousness.
We then spent some time really exploring how our ego and mind meticulously act as these architects of an illusion of separation, how they diligently construct a vulnerable, isolated sense of self and a perceived reality that fundamentally hides this underlying unity. We delved into how this impacts our actual experience, often leading to fear, suffering, and that pervasive sense of disconnection from ourselves and, well, everyone else.
Right. And then we looked at the diverse paths and the transformative practices offered across so many different traditions to begin undoing this illusion. Everything from the rigorous dark night described by Christian mystics and the profound Buddhist no-self teachings to the very practical cultivation of presence advocated by modern spiritual teachers like Tolle and Singer, and the expanding compassion found in practices like Tonglen. These are all these intricate, unique ways to move toward that direct realization of unity.
Finally, we examined the profound insights and the deep personal transformations that seem to occur with this direct experience, that sense of ineffable joy William James documented, an expanding self that starts to recognize holiness and unity in all others, like in the Course in Miracles or Theologia Germanica. And the ability Frankl showed us to find deep meaning and unshakable peace right in the present moment, even amidst the most challenging circumstances imaginable.
Yeah.
We also make sure to touch upon those important distinctions, like the personal versus impersonal aspects of the divine found in the Gita, and that absolutely critical danger Aldous Huxley warned us about merely intellectualizing non-duality, emphasizing that huge gulf between just understanding a concept and truly living its realization.
It's just so clear that this ancient wisdom, this core message of unity, resonates so deeply across cultures and throughout time. It really challenges us to look beyond the surface of things, doesn't it? To question our most fundamental assumptions about who we are and the world we think we inhabit.
It really does.
So here's maybe something to ponder as you go about your week, a thought to carry with you. If the deepest truth of your being is indeed one with the entire universe, if that art thou truly describes your ultimate nature, how might that profound awareness begin to transform your perception of every single moment, every challenge you face, and every single person you encounter? Even those unseen and unordered parts of life that might seem chaotic or separate, how might that shift things?
That's a truly profound question to carry forward. It invites not just contemplation, but potentially a subtle yet incredibly powerful shift in the very way we experience and engage with existence itself, a shift towards seeing that unity everywhere,